Yesterday, the first political talks in Northern Ireland for 16 years collapsed. Tonight, we talk to the ordinary people caught up in Ulster's violence and hear of growing fears that the province is now destined to go back to the bullets and the bombs.
Never would be involved in anything or caught up, just pushing around kids for okay.
Katrina Rennie was shot at point-blank range by terrorists. This is Cemetery Sunday in the small town of Lurgan, an annual event for blessing the dead which today has particular poignancy. New graves bear witness to the futile murders of 3 young people. Killings that proved whatever the politicians try, the violence continues. The failure of the talks yesterday surprised no one here.
I think pessimism is now part of our makeup because we've gone through over 20 years of the Troubles. It is difficult to be optimistic. And when you consider there's been 4 attempts at an internal settlement and all have failed, and when you consider in this very, very small landmass, nearly 3,000 people have been killed, and people have just seen nothing but failure.
It took 18 months to get all sides together at Stormont near Belfast. The talks were heralded as a breakthrough, the first in 16 years. But the politicians could hardly agree on anything. After 3 weeks, they reached a stalemate. Despite the collapse, the man who'd engineered the initiative hopes some good will come out of it.
Those who would say, "I told you so, it would never work," I offer the reality of the past few weeks. While I am naturally disappointed at this moment that the current process has to end, foundations have been laid for progress in the future, which neither cynics nor the men of violence will be able to undermine.
Tonight, that's not a convincing argument for the people of Ulster. Their problems are not only about politics, but about culture, religion and identity. 60% feel British, the rest Irish. Here, where conflict is part of everyday life, people are worried the peace process has been put back years. For 2 decades, innocent families have had their lives shattered by the conflict. Despite the talks, most people here don't believe the politicians can stop the killings. Our investigations into one of the most chilling murders in recent months shows how 20 years of violence have polarized the extremes in both communities and produced a particularly deadly breed of killer. A Catholic housing estate in Lurgan. An atrocity epitomizes the entrenched divisions throughout the province. March the 28th this year at 8 in the evening.
Everyone on the ground! Are you deaf? Don't you hear me? Get down on the ground!
Customers are ordered to leave.
Get out! Get your ass out of there! Come on!
2 girls have been serving them. One shot hit 17-year-old Katrina Rennie. The other killed her friend, 19-year-old Eileen Duffy. friend of the girls tried to intervene. 29-year-old Brian Frizzell was repeatedly shot in the back. They left a scene of utter carnage. 3 more statistics in a savage catalogue of brutality. Eyewitnesses are now frightened for their lives.
I seen the blood coming out of his mouth. And his eyes open and he was dead. Slaying, I didn't know what to do. Shaking. When I was dead, like. Then I got up and I walked into the mobile. I seen everything I knew they were there. I just walked out of the mobile. Didn't know what to do. Just on the floor, like. Just stood there for a minute, just in shock.
Eileen Duffy was a secretary and the only breadwinner in her family. She worked in the shop in the evenings to earn extra cash.
Like a dream if it wasn't happening, everything was slow. There was a man in there before me, he knew first aid, and he says, I said to him, are they dead? He says, Katrina was dead, I wasn't sure about Eileen. So when I went over to Eileen and I felt for her pulse, and I couldn't feel any, so I started pumping her chest, and then I felt her wrist again, and her neck, but she was dead. And where she had been sitting, she didn't know me. No time to get up or anything.
This particular outrage was horrific even by Northern Ireland standards. The victims were 3 innocent people that not even the most hardened terrorist could cynically call a legitimate target. Thousands turned out for the funeral. The whole community was stunned.
It's just like a nightmare, you know. You try to block her out for a wee while, but you're even sitting talking to people and she's in the back of your mind. And even I go to bed at night, I think about her. I'm getting up in the morning and thinking about her.
Brutal murders like these breed bitterness. The shooting was claimed by a loyalist paramilitary group, the Ulster Volunteer Force, who used the cover name the Protestant Action Force, or PAF.
It's kept to go down, right in the headstone, murdered by PAF, and you say to yourself, like, she was there one minute, and then a bullet was put into her head, for what reason, and she's not there anymore. It's very hard to understand. Yeah, very, it makes me feel sick as well. You know, it's Joe's well, but to me, he's just grabbed a massive piece of our family jigsaw and let it be replaced.
Relatives have received hundreds of letters of sympathy, not just from Catholics, but from Protestants too.
Katrina was a credit not only to herself, but also to you both. The world was robbed of a very special person, and although she had a very short life, she touched and enriched the lives of many people.
I'm so very, very sorry that such a short, beautiful life has been cut off in such a way. It makes me so angry that such monsters are called loyalists.
Very difficult to find the words to express the horror and revulsion that we feel to families belonging to the Protestant faith.
The Rennies found a list of her hopes for the future, one of which would never be fulfilled.
That was one of the, you know, the wee goals you had in our wee thing that she was writing out, which was the pay.
In Northern Ireland's political vacuum, the only voice ordinary people have is expressed on the streets. This is a march for justice. The least these people want is the murderers caught. It's not surprising that they protest. The level of killings has remained constant despite the talk. 40 dead so far this year. You can see the scale of the problem by looking at one specific area. In a 25-mile radius of Portadown, terrorists play a deadly game of tit-for-tat. Republicans in the IRA have murdered 23 people here in the past 2.5 years. This has been matched by loyalist paramilitaries. The UVF has killed 19 people over the same period, including the 3 at the mobile shop. The vast majority of people in Northern Ireland are sick of the killings and desperate for peace. They see the terrorists becoming increasingly sectarian, killing innocent people simply because of their religion or background. In this climate, the politicians, under pressure to do something about the violence, finally agreed to open talks. But the Ulster politicians couldn't even agree an agenda. They wrangled over procedures and who should chair some of the meetings. One of the main stumbling blocks was the timing of a routine meeting held as part of the Anglo-Irish Agreement, the accord signed 6 years ago, which gave Dublin a say in Northern Ireland's affairs. The political divisions reflect those found in the communities the parties represent, where extremists proclaim their allegiances and mark out their territory with murals on walls. This was the intended target of the shooting at the mobile shop. John Jenkinson, a Catholic, owned the vehicle and employed one of the girls. The UVF wanted him dead because they claimed he has links with the IRA, though he firmly denies it. What are your feelings about the fact that they were killed and that you were the target?
Not much you can say about that, is it?
And how has it affected you and the way you live and the way you think?
Well, you know, obviously then that there's somebody out there that doesn't like you. You know, and it's just, you try to be more security conscious.
John Jenkinson puts bars across his stairs at night to keep the killers out. He ordered his employees not to serve members of the security forces in the shop because of IRA warnings that if they do, they themselves would be targets. He's trapped. If they do discriminate, the loyalists are likely to put them on their hit lists too.
If there's anybody that left as a member of the security forces, EDR, IEC, many civilians mentioned serving.
Why wouldn't you serve a policeman or a soldier?
The IRA suggests if you serve member of the security forces or you had anything to do, you split them with them in your relations in danger. So for that reason, you would not serve the security forces.
So what did you tell Eileen to do if a soldier or a policeman came into the shop?
Everybody was told this. You just explain that you can't serve them for obvious reasons.
You do that, would you?
Yeah.
And when you were serving in the shop?
Well, they would have come in for general harassment. They would have come into the shop and asked for sweets or cigarettes. Jokingly like no one, that we just couldn't serve them.
Outrages like the killings at the mobile shop instill an atmosphere of fear that can pervade an entire community. It's the very aim of terrorism.
Well, I couldn't really sleep in there at all. Just totally scared. I want to see the dark, like, out in the dark, walking about. Just every car comes in fast, like I just freeze, stop it. It comes back in every 5 months, like what happens. Doesn't matter where you are.
What sort of life do people live on these estates here?
Very sheltered. Fear mostly now.
Fear of who?
Well, fear of the people at the mobile. The Protestants want peace. Catholics want peace. Then there's always these people put a stop to that.
Such polarised communities are a fertile recruiting ground for paramilitaries on both sides. Even in a single family, one mixed marriage can lead to a legacy of hate. That happened to John Jenkinson. Brought up a Catholic, he in the past supported Sinn Féin, the political wing of the IRA. Across the sectarian lines that divide the province, he has a Protestant cousin. In the 70s, Philip Silcock was once involved with loyalist paramilitaries.
We talked about the friends who died and we hope there be no more. It's
when rioting broke out in 1969, they lived on neighbouring estates in Lurgan. But as civil disobedience turned to the bullet and the bomb, the two communities retreated into their own separate ghettos. Over the years, the two cousins inevitably grew apart. Philip Silcock joined a fiercely loyalist flute band. It was the membership of that band and the ideology that went with it that shattered forever the relationship with his cousin.
While it was getting changed, I overheard him saying that he wasn't going up the town centre with me dressed in that and that sort of thing. That's the last real vivid memories I have of him, you know. He seemed to resent the fact that I had a Protestant bondsman uniform on. Up until then, I'd never thought him as being a Catholic as such. He was just a friend and a relative, you know.
With the marching season reaching its climax next week, he still invests enormous pride in such public displays of his heritage.
It's important, this tradition. It's something that our young people grow up to understand what the country's about. I suppose it's a way of proclaiming your Britishness. If you can't proclaim your Britishness in Britain, where else can you proclaim it?
His Catholic cousin grew up to understand he was in an oppressed minority. From 1968, Catholics took to the streets to protest at social conditions. They felt they were discriminated against by the Protestant majority.
My mother, she went to civil rights marches and trailed me along with her. After that, there was a lot of sectarian sort of Catholics. The states normally split. And after that, I've never got back to it.
As rifts widened, the tide turned. Protestants, at the mercy of the IRA, now felt they were under siege. Philip Silcock and others like him took the law into their own hands, and in the late 70s he was jailed for possessing guns and ammunition.
When I first got involved with lawless paramilitaries, if you want to say that, I saw my community as being under attack. It seemed that the screens were filled day and night. Pictures of mosque area. The word no-go area, for instance, was in common use. The real law didn't seem to apply to them. And I had my hometown, town centre, was bombed nearly on a weekly basis at one stage. Didn't relate myself or see myself as being anti-Catholic or trying to bring anything down. I saw myself as having to defend something, having a duty to my community to get involved.
He was released from prison in 1984 at about the same time as a part-time soldier who was an old friend of his from Lurgan was ambushed and murdered by the IRA. The incident has coloured his view of his cousin ever since. The soldier, David Chambers, had died instantly, but in the aftermath, John Jenkinson was questioned, then released, and a friend of his jailed for the murder. If the IRA stopped the violence, do you think that would bring peace?
Well, it would stop the violence. But whether it would bring equality or not, I don't think it would ever change. Protestants almost seem to get the good job, they don't they? Catholics were sort of underclass.
Jenkinson says he'd like to meet his Protestant cousin, but Silcock says he won't.
I could have nothing in common with him. I certainly would have no desire to meet him, socially or otherwise.
What do you do when you pass him in the street?
Ignore him.
The main barriers to any lasting peace in Northern Ireland are the paramilitaries and the violence that they spawn. But for the future of the province, both the IRA and the UVF have different aims.
I think that the IRA have got a bigger agenda than the UVF. The loyalist paramilitaries, to use their own terms, see themselves as counter-terrorists. They are there to react to the IRA. The IRA has got a huge political agenda, which is Irish unity, self-determination, and they're not prepared to settle for anything less. UVF, UDA see themselves simply as trying to protect their communities. In that sense, They're not on the same wavelength as the IRA. They don't carry the same threat.
But there's a new threat to frighten away Protestants living near Catholic areas. In April this year, there was a terrorist attack on this mobile home. It was a site where a father of 4 was planning to build his dream house. When gunmen burst in on Derek Ferguson, his wife wasn't there, but his children were.
The little child ran to the phone and rang up her grandmother and said, Nana, would you come down and look after us because the bad men have come and shot my daddy dead? When the grandmother came down to the mobile home, she saw her 2 grandchildren hanging over daddy, putting their fingers into the holes where the bullets had gone into daddy's body, and they were trying to keep the blood from coming out. Fortunately, daddy was dead.
Derek Ferguson was killed near the village of Coke, but local Protestants believe his death was one of a series of 3 by the IRA, which follow a chilling pattern. 6 months ago in Kilray, another Protestant, Bertie Gilmore, was murdered and his wife seriously injured at the site of his new home. 2 days later, near Macarrah, they struck again. A baker, David Shields, was gunned down in his home. His wife and 4-week-old baby narrowly escaped.
On each occasion, they were a minority Protestant community verging on a large Roman Catholic community. And they looked upon them therefore as a threat, because when they were establishing new homes, they weren't moving, they weren't going. So therefore, they sought to wipe out families.
One of the victims of this series of shootings did have security links, but David Shields, a baker, did not. His wife and tiny baby were in their mobile home at the time he was shot and were grazed by bullets.
They have got Dave's name from the planning list, which is published in the local papers, and that was how he was targeted, that he was putting down roots, and this is to put a fear into the people, and hopefully from their point of view the people will leave.
His family wished to perpetuate his memory with a tree and a poem.
Who has the right to take a life and mould a widow from a wife? Who has the right to leave a child without the warmth of his father's smile? We have the right to ask them why they came with guns to make us cry.
Before the inter-party talks, the UVF ordered a ceasefire, but it didn't hold. There is no significant power sharing in Ulster, and these men believe they should try to find some way of filling the political vacuum. Sinn Féin, the political wing of the IRA, weren't invited, but everyone who was wanted different things.
You have to remember that we're dealing with fundamental questions of identity and allegiance. I think the Unionist parties are afraid that they could lose their British identity if they go too far into the talks. The SDLP are afraid that what they might lose is what they've gained out of the Anglo-Irish Agreement.
The SDLP look at things differently than I look at them. I have the clear knowledge that I am a British subject, desire to remain so, and to be a part of the British family and way of life. The SDLP, they look towards Dublin. Now, I personally resent the interference of Dublin with in the affairs of Northern Ireland.
William McRae and his followers believe peace and then stability will only come if the security forces are given a freer hand to stop the violence.
There has to be more SAS type activities where the SAS is allowed to go in to deal with the terrorist threat. I believe that to suggest that normal, nice, conventional measures against a guerrilla warfare of the terrorists will never really work. I want a society where stability will come about through the direct measures of the forces of law and order, but are
remember the forces of law and order have a God-given duty to be a terror to the evil. That's not my word, that's God's word.
But it's a concept nationalists will never buy. They believe the security forces are already too heavy-handed, and their actions sometimes push young people towards the terrorists.
And very often, their problems stem from the type of counter-violence that comes from the security forces. And there is the chicken and the egg situation, and that is why it is so absolutely important that in pursuance of the law, that those who are supposed to be enforcing the law do so, above all within the law, and with respect for each and every person's rights as an individual.
The latest talks have now ended, and the fear of failure has been realised. At midnight tonight, loyalist paramilitaries will officially end their ceasefire. Without a political solution, there's the added worry that the violence will escalate again. The province may revert back to the bullet and the bomb.
Well, unless some of the serious government politicians